Hello, I'm Katie Wilson and you're watching A News. Let's take a look at today's top stories. Iran vows revenge as missiles hit Israel whilst a top US official resigns over the war. France rules out joining efforts to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, exposing divisions with Washington. Starmer and Zelensky warn the world must not lose focus on Ukraine despite the Iran war. Thanks for joining us. Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian has vowed to avenge the death of top official Ali Larijani, promising harsh revenge against those responsible for the strike. Retaliatory attacks between Iran and Israel overnight have spread to multiple fronts, including Lebanon and Iraq. As the situation intensifies, the crisis is also prompting political reactions in Washington.
Iran has vowed strong retaliation after the killing of senior official Ali Larijani, who died in a strike in Tehran on Tuesday. Iranian state television says the country responded by launching multiple missiles toward Israel, describing the attack as a direct act of revenge. Some of the missiles were reported to carry cluster munitions. In central Israel, at least 2 people were killed when a missile struck a residential neighborhood in Ramat Gan, near Tel Aviv. Emergency services say several others were injured. Air raid sirens sounded across Tel Aviv and Jerusalem as the barrage lit up the night sky. The Israeli military confirmed it had identified missile launches from Iran and said several locations in central Israel were hit. Police are continuing to assess the damage as rescue teams search affected areas. As the United States continues to back Israel in its strikes on Iran, the conflict is also triggering political reaction in Washington. Joe Kent, head of the National Counterterrorism Center under Donald Trump, has resigned over the war. In a public statement, Kent said he could not support the conflict, arguing that Iran posed no immediate threat to the United States. In Iraq, the US embassy in Baghdad once again came under attack. According to Iraqi security officials, drones and rockets targeted the heavily fortified Green Zone. At least one strike caused a fire after air defenses failed to intercept it. Meanwhile, Israel carried out overnight strikes in Beirut. The Israeli military says it targeted sites linked to Hezbollah, including missile launchers and infrastructure. Israel claims the strikes come in response to continued attacks from the group, signaling a growing front in Lebanon.
Well, Iran has lost one of its most powerful and influential figures in Ali Larijani, a key architect of the country's security strategy. Iranian media confirmed his death in an Israeli airstrike on Monday.
At the center of Iran's power structure stood a figure who shaped its security, diplomacy, and political direction for decades: Ali Larijani. He was widely seen as an architect of Iran's security strategy and one of the Islamic Republic's most influential power brokers. He was killed in an Israeli strike, according to Israeli and US officials, with Iranian media later confirming his death, marking a major moment in the escalating conflict. A veteran insider and close advisor to Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, Larijani held influence across multiple centers of power. Born in 1958 into a prominent clerical family, often referred to as the Kennedys of Iran, he rose through the ranks of the Islamic Republic. He was also a member of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps during the Iran-Iraq War, a background that cemented his ties to Iran's security establishment. In the 1990s, he led Iran's state broadcaster from 1994 to 2004, a key role in shaping the country's internal messaging. He later moved into the core of Iran's security establishment, serving as Secretary of the Supreme National Security Council and as Iran's chief nuclear negotiator between 2005 and 2007. In 2008, he became Speaker of Parliament, a position he held for 12 years until 2020. In August 2025, he returned as Secretary of the Supreme National Security Council, overseeing defense, intelligence, and foreign policy. Since early 2026, he re-emerged as one of the most dominant figures in the system, with some analysts describing him as a de facto leader. Some analysts argue his loss may be even more consequential than that of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, due to his hands-on role in managing Iran's strategy. He played a central role in shaping Iran's response to tensions with Israel and the United States, while managing regional ties and global partnerships. He was also linked to the government's response to internal unrest, a role that drew international criticism and sanctions. Though often described as a pragmatist, he remained firmly committed to Iran's theocratic system, balancing diplomacy with hardline positions. He also served as a public face of the leadership, projecting its message through diplomacy and media. With decades of experience across Iran's political, security, and diplomatic spheres, he remained one of the few figures capable of navigating the entire system. In a structure built on continuity and control, Ali Larijani was more than a political figure. He was a central pillar. And at a time of war and uncertainty, his death could have consequences far beyond Iran's borders.
Well, as we've been saying, the US has intensified its military actions against Iran, targeting sites near the Strait of Hormuz. Officials say the strikes aim to protect shipping lanes and stabilize energy markets. However, concerns are growing over the wider economic impact of the conflict. Our correspondent Ubi Shabandar has more from Washington.
U.S. Central Command has said that the U.S. military has successfully dropped multiple 5,000-pound deep penetrator bombs on top of hardened Iranian missile sites along Iran's coastline near the Strait of Hormuz. These sites were believed to hold anti-ship cruise missiles that were used to target ships traversing the strategic waterway. President Trump has been pressing key allies to work jointly with the U.S. to reopen the Strait of Hormuz and stabilize global energy prices. U.S. oil executives have reportedly warned the administration that the energy crisis caused by the war with Iran could worsen due to the disruption to shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. President Trump earlier in the week said that the U.S. and Israeli strikes against Iran have destroyed a number of factories that are producing long-range missiles, and that all military installations on the Iranian Kharg Island, which lies in the middle of the Strait of Hormuz, have been destroyed. Trump said that he's pushing allies to do more to support efforts to prevent Iran from threatening energy supplies from moving through the Strait of Hormuz. And he called Iran a, quote, paper tiger. And while Iran's missile and drone launches against the region have significantly dropped in number, they are still able to hit Tel Aviv and Dubai while continuing to target Saudi Arabia's oil fields. And according to fresh reports from Washington, the Trump administration is planning to ease Venezuelan oil sanctions in order to boost oil supplies and attempt to drive down oil prices. And the Pentagon has said that it plans to mass produce U.S. kamikaze drones after their successful use in recent strikes against Iranian military facilities. I'm Ubi Shabandar, A News, Washington.
Well, in the past 24 hours, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israeli forces have killed 2 senior Iranian figures. He framed the strikes as enabling Iranians to celebrate Nowruz, adding, "We're watching from above."
I'm here with Israel's defense minister, our chief of staff, the head of the Mossad, the chief of Air Force, our senior commanders. In the past 24 hours, we knocked out 2 of the terrorist chieftains, the top terrorist chieftains of this tyranny. Our aircraft are hitting the terror operatives on the ground, in the crossroads, in the city squares. This is meant to enable the brave people of Iran to celebrate the Festival of Fire. So celebrate and Happy Nowruz. We're watching from above.
France has ruled out joining any military operation to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. President Emmanuel Macron emphasised that Paris will not be drawn in whilst tensions persist. The decision highlights a growing divide with President Trump as European allies lean towards caution and sustained defence cooperation rather than direct involvement.
Welcome to This Day in Europe, as France rules out joining any military effort to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, dealing a fresh blow to U.S. efforts to build a coalition. French President Emmanuel Macron said Paris would never take part in operations to unblock the strategic waterway while hostilities continue, stressing France is not a party to the Iran conflict. Macron appeared to push back against suggestions from Washington that allies should support U.S.-led action. Instead, French officials say any role in securing the strait would only come after de-escalation, potentially through an international escort mission agreed with partners and involving dialogue with Iran. France's position reflects a broader reluctance among Western allies to be drawn into the conflict, even as the closure of the Strait of Hormuz disrupts global energy supplies. But that reluctance is further frustrating Washington. U.S. President Donald Trump warned that NATO allies are making a very foolish mistake by refusing to take part in operations to secure the strait, a vital route for global oil shipments. This follows his earlier comments about NATO possibly facing a very bad future if allies fail to support U.S. efforts. At the same time, Europe continues to strengthen its own defense capabilities amid security threats from the Ukraine war and the Mideast crisis. The UK, Finland, and the Netherlands are looking into setting up a new financing mechanism by next year to aggregate demand, drive joint procurement, accelerate defense investment, and increase the availability of critical capabilities such as munitions. The initiative would complement NATO and EU efforts while making defense spending more efficient. Dutch Finance Minister Eelco Heijnen says it would be a new way of defense cooperation with European partners and that he's open to like-minded Western partners in and outside the EU. All these developments underline a widening transatlantic divide, with the U.S. pushing for military action to secure global energy routes, while European allies prioritize caution, coordination, and long-term defense cooperation over direct involvement in the Iran conflict. For A News, I'm Anita Sharma in Arnhem, Netherlands.
Now, amid the ongoing war in the Middle East, the UK says the focus must still remain firmly on Ukraine, with Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer warning that President Putin must not benefit from the wider crisis. Speaking alongside President Zelensky, both leaders emphasised continued support and closer defence cooperation.
So focus must remain on Ukraine despite the Iran war. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer said it during their meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in Downing Street on Tuesday. Both leaders warned that global attention must remain on Ukraine despite the ongoing conflict in the Middle East. Welcoming Zelensky, Starmer stressed that support for Ukraine must not weaken, warning that President Vladimir Putin must not gain from the wider instability. The talks come at a critical moment with rising tensions in the region, fueling concerns that higher oil prices and shifting international focus could benefit Russia's war effort. The US has temporarily eased sanctions on some Russian oil to tackle surging prices triggered by the conflict in the Middle East.
It's really important that we're clear and consistent that Putin can't be the one who benefits from the conflict in Iran, whether that's oil prices or the dropping of sanctions. It is really important that we keep up our resolve in relation to supporting Ukraine and doing everything we can to weaken the hand of Putin.
Also not to forget about our diplomatic efforts, negotiations, and where we are with Americans and with Russians. We have to discuss this sensitive topic Yes, and of course about Middle East, you mentioned it has big influence, I think, on Ukraine and on Europe. So thank you again for your support and thanks to your people.
Later in a speech in parliament, Zelensky described the regimes in Russia and Iran as brothers in hatred. He mentioned how Tehran was selling Shahid kamikaze drones to Moscow, which had been used in Ukraine. During their meeting, the two leaders agreed a new defense partnership focused on drone technology, now seen as central to modern warfare. The deal will combine Ukraine's battlefield experience with UK's industrial capacity to produce and supply advanced systems. The UK has also pledged £500,000 funding for an artificial intelligence centre in Kiev to support defence innovation and strengthen Ukraine's capabilities on the front line. Zelensky ended his speech saying Europe is a global force that can stand against any other power. He called for closer UK cooperation and shared defence technology, warning people should never again have to live under drones. Zaina Farizadeh, A News, Manchester, United Kingdom.
An EU diplomatic source says a €90 billion loan package for Ukraine has been agreed, with a formal decision expected imminently. That's according to a Bulgarian national radio source. European Council President Antonio Costa reportedly pressed Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban to stand by the commitment reached by leaders in December. At tomorrow's summit, leaders are set to address the war in Iran, ongoing support for Ukraine, and the impact of elevated energy prices across the bloc. Now, let's take a look at the major stories from the region. The European Union is raising increasingly sharp concerns about Georgia's political direction, focusing on controversial laws, the handling of protests, and broader democratic standards. At the same time, the issue is exposing divisions within the EU itself. Most member states are criticising Tbilisi, whilst Hungary openly supports the Georgian government. Nini Nikolaishvili has more from Tbilisi.
The European Union is stepping up pressure on Georgia, warning of democratic backsliding linked to specific recent developments. Speaking ahead of a meeting of EU foreign ministers in Brussels, Kaja Kallas said the situation in Georgia is becoming more and more serious, confirming that a visa ban on Georgian diplomatic passport holders has been in force since March 6. EU concerns are tied to two key issues: the adoption of the so-called foreign agents law, which European officials argue restricts civil society and independent organizations, and the authorities' handling of ongoing anti-government protests, including allegations of pressure on demonstrators and limitations on political freedoms. These concerns were echoed by multiple EU member states. Finnish Foreign Minister Elina Valtonen warned that new legislation is limiting freedoms and weakening democratic safeguards. Lithuanian Foreign Minister Kęstutis Budrys said the use of the foreign agents law raises serious questions about the state of democracy. Meanwhile, other EU officials stressed that Georgia's path toward European integration depends directly on maintaining democratic standards and institutions. In contrast, Hungary openly rejected the EU's critical stance. Foreign Minister Péter Szijjártó defended the Georgian government, arguing that democratic elections had taken place and that protests are a normal democratic process. He accused the EU of applying double standards and confirmed Hungary's political support for Tbilisi. The Georgian government also pushed back. A member of the ruling Georgian Dream, Tengiz Sharmanashvili, dismissed Kallas as biased and described EU criticism as unfounded. He also rejected the findings of the OSCE Moscow Mechanism report, claiming it lacked evidence and was politically predetermined. Nini Nikolaishvili, Tbilisi, A News.
Staying in Tbilisi, Georgia's longest-serving spiritual leader has died at the age of 93. Ilya II, who led the Georgian Orthodox Church for nearly half a century, helped restore its influence after the Soviet era. Let's take a look.
Ilya II, the spiritual leader of the Georgian Orthodox Church for nearly half a century, has died at the age of 93. The Catholicos Patriarch passed away on Tuesday after being hospitalized with severe internal bleeding, according to senior church officials. He led the church since 1977, overseeing its transformation from an institution suppressed under Soviet rule into the most influential non-state body in Georgia. Born Irakli Gudushauri Shiolashvili in 1933, Ilya II studied theology in Moscow before returning to Georgia, where he rose through the ranks of the clergy. Under his leadership, the church regained prominence, especially after Georgia's independence in 1991, becoming a central pillar of national identity. A landmark agreement in 2002 further strengthened its position, granting the church special rights in education, cultural heritage, and taxation. Ilya II remained one of the most trusted figures in the country, as the church consistently ranked as Georgia's most respected institution. Throughout his tenure, he navigated the country's struggle between traditional values and aspirations for closer ties with Europe. He held conservative views on social issues. His leadership also faced scrutiny over the church's ties to Russia, a sensitive issue in Georgia's political landscape. In later years, he called for peace during the war in Ukraine, warning of the risks of wider conflict. The Holy Synod now has 40 days to elect his successor.
Long-serving legacy there. Finally, Kazakhstan is taking a step towards entering the European green energy market. Lawmakers in Astana have ratified a strategic agreement that could pave the way for a new trans-regional energy corridor linking Central Asia to Europe. The project focuses on exporting renewable electricity across the Caspian and Black Seas as demand for clean energy continues to grow.
Kazakhstan's Majlis has ratified the strategic partnership agreement with Azerbaijan and Uzbekistan on green energy. The project could reshape the region's energy landscape and open a direct route to European markets. The deal was signed by the three countries' leaders in Baku in 2024 on the sidelines of COP29. It aims to link the energy systems of Central Asia and the South Caucasus into a single export network. The plan is to deliver renewable electricity from Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan to Azerbaijan and then onto Europe. A key part of the project is a high-voltage subsea cable along the bottom of the Caspian Sea. It's technically complex, but officials say it's essential for direct access to the European Union's electricity market. The feasibility study is already backed by international partners. The Asian Development Bank and the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank have confirmed grant funding of around $2 million. The study itself is estimated at about €1 million. In Astana, officials say the project will strengthen export capacity and support technological development. Kazakhstan is also looking to position itself as a key energy hub in Eurasia as demand for clean energy grows in Europe looks to diversify its supplies. Parisa Kalimurzina, Almaty, A News.
Well, that's your news for this hour. Stay tuned to A News for more updates, and thank you for watching.